Well, we only got a short 20 minutes, and I see we've got attendees piling in, so let's get kicked off. We got a lot to cover. So welcome again. I'm Jeffrey Richardson, Director of Product Marketing here at Kochava, and this is part 2 of our 3-part mini webinar series on MMM 101. So in part 1, we talked about what is marketing mix modeling. If you didn't get to catch that part, we recommend going back and watching it. There's some foundational concepts in there that are vital. It won't mean you can't understand today, but go back and be sure to check that out. And then today we're going to talk about how to effectively use marketing mix modeling. So how you actually implement that into your strategy and make decisions off of it, etc. So we do love your questions. We won't be able to get to them all, but if you have questions, put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we will pick off any that we're able to get to. I'm excited to welcome back Gary Danks. He again is the founder of Machine Advertising, who Kochava acquired last year, based out of the UK, especially because of the AIM platform, Always On Incremental Measurement, which is the next gen kind of MMM platform. So I should note that this has been our most popular webinar series to date by sheer count of registrations and attendees. So this topic is obviously top of mind for a lot of you out there, and we are excited to be on this journey with you. MMM, we truly believe is part of the future of campaign measurement and omni-channel strategy. So with that, Gary, let's jump right in and talk about how to effectively use marketing mix modeling. So do you want to kick off for us on that topic?
Yeah, sure. Hi, and welcome everyone. So how to use MMM effectively? Really, you need to have the mindset that MMM is a very powerful tool within your marketing toolkit, within your marketing stack. MMM at a very high level provides you information that means that you can strategically adjust your budget allocation to achieve more efficient and effective results from your marketing investment. And that's what it does at a high level. Now, to use it effectively, it's like any skill, you need to learn it. It would be unreasonable for a beginner driver, a completely new driver, for example, to expect to pass a driving test tomorrow. It's the same with MMM. It's not going to improve your marketing results tomorrow, but it will do with patience and time, testing and failing and learning and starting again. So very much see it as a skill that needs to be learned. You don't need to be a data scientist. Certainly not if you're using a good system. You just need to understand the foundations that underpin MMM, the data that it uses and the output that it gives you, and understand those nuances. So with that, I've got a few slides here to demonstrate the type of data that MMM produces and the information it gives you so that you can use it. Well, you can improve your marketing efficiency and effectively improve your marketing results. So the first one is a bit of a recap on what we discussed in the first session, but it's important to, I'm not going to repeat myself, but it is important to echo what MMM measures. So MMM measures at one level, it measures the influence of your marketing. So let's just say that this is your marketing mix that you're using for app promotions. Your ad spend may look something like this. It's distributed across these media sources, with the majority of your ad spend going to Apple Search and Google. This is very common. This is typically what we see in the market. What MMM does is it measures the influence of each one of your media sources on your sales or your KPIs, whatever it is that you're optimizing. And that can look quite different to where you're distributing and allocating your ad spend. So what MMM does is it's measuring the contribution of each one of your media sources on your sales. Okay, now with this information, what can you do with it? So, well, you can. This is new information. It's not information that you've had to hand before. You can start to increase and decrease spend where you feel you can get more influence on sales. So those that have a greater influence on your sales, you can increase spend, and those media sources that have not as high influence, you can decrease the spend. So you can start to push the acceleration and the brake pedal down on each one of these media sources. The end game here really is.
And
Yeah,
Gary,
go ahead.
yeah, I noticed obviously there's some bars there where the delta between the gray versus the orange is much darker, right? And I know there's a notion of not making any hard right turns with MMM recommendations, right? So it wouldn't mean you'd want to close overnight the gap, for instance, like you see on Apple search ads. It's not like you want to decrease spend, 80% or something like that. So can you speak more about how you look at this recommendation and actually put it into action?
Yeah, absolutely. Really, the ultimate goal here is to have a chart, a visual that looks something like this, so that your ad spend and your media influence on sales is quite equal. But that's not always possible. And with the example that you just gave, Jeff, with Apple search ads and maybe Google as well, is that these are very large networks. They can take a large amount of ad spend, but they may not have a great deal of influence. So in a good system, an MMM tool, it wouldn't tell you to go from as you say, let's pick a figure, $1,000 a day on Apple search ads down to $200 a day, for example. It would point you in the right direction. It would give you that guidance to say, we may go from A to Z. This is the end game here. But to get there, we're going to take you on a journey, and we're going to take steps to get there. So maybe let's just decrease the ad spend on Google by 5% next week and increase it by 2 or 3% on Liftoff and 2 or 3% on Jamp and so on. And the reason why it's doing that is because what's demonstrated on the next slide, which is what we call cost curves. So MMM measures the cost curves of each one of your media sources. So they would look something like this. I've put the Liftoff badge on here just to give it an identity. This isn't real data. This is just mock-up data, but it's very common. So what I'm showing you here is very familiar. It's data that we see pretty much every day. What a cost curve does is that it measures the point of diminishing returns. So for example, in scenario A, it's going to measure that on Liftoff today, your current spend is roughly about $1,600 a day, and you're acquiring about 59 acquisitions for that. So the CPA is roughly about $28. A good MMM system would be able to show you what your optimal spend is. So in this case, for example, the optimal spend is up here at B. So it's giving you an indication of the capacity for your brand, your app on that network, Liftoff in this case, for the platform that you're promoting, iOS, Android, or whatever it may be. So it's giving you the information to say to you, actually, you can go to approximately about $4,000 a day, and you will acquire about 112 acquisitions. The CPA goes up a little bit, but you're getting a lot more for your money. So you're basically getting a CPA of about $34. Now, just as importantly, is that it will also show you where you shouldn't be going to. Actually, point B is the optimal spend. Anything beyond point B becomes the point of diminishing returns. So as you can see, quite quickly, you can actually be at point A or even B and think to yourself, actually, liftoff is performing quite well for me. So I'm going to double my spend. And double your spend actually gets you to about $7,000 a day, and but only acquires you five additional acquisitions. So your CPA all of a sudden is going through the roof. Does that make sense, Jeff?
Yeah, no, that's interesting, because I think so you could be anywhere between A and B on that curve, but there's a scale capacity, right, where at some point you can't scale beyond that. So I guess as we think about how that C is found, is that found through modeling, if you will, or predicting how far out that reach can go before that diminishing return is reached?
Yeah, exactly. It's all down to the modeling within the MMM system. So it's building models based on your historical data, based on real-time data, the geographical location, the market conditions, the seasonality, all of those things that go into this. So for example, in this example here, Liftoff may have more capacity for your brand around the Christmas holidays, but an MMM would know that, and it would give you that advice. But if you think back to the last slide where it's measuring influence, and to go back to your previous question, where the influence of Apple search ads was very low, but the ad spend was very high. So a natural sort of knee-jerk reaction to someone testing sort of MMM data for the first time would be to cut all that spend on Apple search ads and pile it onto someone like Liftoff. But you could end up in a situation like this very quickly. So you have to be careful about where you apply your spend, because networks really, or media sources really only have a certain amount of capacity of population for your brand. This is actually a very friendly cost curve as well. This one here, which I haven't branded because it would be unfair, is actually very common as well. So the point of diminishing returns happens much more aggressively. So you can find yourself in trouble very quickly if you don't have this information to hand. So current ad spend is $1,600. You're getting about 60 acquisitions a day, and you're happy with $27 CPA. But actually your optimum spend is back here, because actually for a reduction in costs 3 times less, you're getting 55 acquisitions and a CPA of just over $9. But you may be happy with scenario A, and you could push your budget further, but you're getting zero benefit. All that's happening is that you're just pushing your CPA up quickly because your brand's capacity has plateaued on this network.
And Gary, how quickly, like if you were at point A and you wanted to get to point B, and maybe this goes as well with the question of how frequently you look at the results versus take action, what would it look like? Would you make this course correction from point A to B in one swoop, or would you want to do it progressively over a series of weeks by chance? Or
yeah, I mean, in this scenario here, where it's nothing too dramatic, you're only, you're spending a few $100s a day, you could do this in one swoop. But a good tool would give you that foresight anyway. So it would give you would understand, actually, I'm quite happy at scenario A, but I'm going to adjust it down to scenario B. But it would have already flagged that up to you way in advance before you got to scenario A. So you'd be in an informed position to understand, I'm happy with scenario A in this case.
Yeah. These are beneficial. This kind of it's a good illustration of where MMM is trying to land you. B is good, A not so good, C bad, right? Is that
pretty much? Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. I'll move on as well, because obviously it's only 20 minutes. So I want to sort of get through the content that we have. To use MMM most effectively, it's the sum of all of its parts. Okay, so what we mean by that is that we don't expect the user, the end user, to be a data scientist. Okay, so it's a bit like when you go to buy a new car. You don't go to the forecourt and see something like this, where they're expecting you to put the car together. You have to be a skilled mechanic, an engineer, or both. The skilled mechanic and the engineer have already done that for you. They've already spent, years of research and development to build you a car that's maximum efficiency for road conditions, for fuel consumption, for weather, for whatever else that you can think of. And it's the same with MMM. So the two slides that I just showed you on measuring the influence and the incrementality of the sales that you get from each partner, and then the cost curves are similar to parts of a car. There's lots of other parts that go into the recommendations that MMM gives you, the output of MMM. So it could be things like your email campaigns, your promotions that you do, the influencers that you use, the seasonality, competition, and so on. So actually, when you go to, a bit like when you go to buy a car, you want to see something that's familiar to you. And it's the same with a good MMM system as well. It's going to present you with data that you're familiar with and that you can action. You can get in and start driving. And as with a car, you wouldn't just get into a brand new car and thrash it. It's an English term, but basically put your foot down, because first you want to get used to the car. It's not good for the car either if you do that, but you want to get used to it. You want to understand its strengths and its weaknesses. It's the same with MMM as well. So you can basically adjust your budget gently with MMM information and see where the results get you over a course of time. It isn't a silver bullet. It's not going to change your results in the next few days.
Yeah, and I think we've got a number of questions popping up in the chat here. We certainly won't be able to get to them all, but I think one thing to call out, right, is MMM is basically channel network level, correct? It's not campaign creative level data. So when you get these recommendations and you then need to go back and apply those budget maneuverings, that's where the bottom up data potentially in your MMP, right? The last touch information at a campaign creative level would be your direct.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Actually, the very last slide goes into this, because to effectively use MMM, it needs to feel like it's part of your operational workflow. And where we've seen clients successfully integrate it into their workflow, it looks something like this. And hopefully this will be familiar to the audience as well. This will give you an understanding of where it fits and what information you can get out of it. So stage one would be very much about the AIM budget optimization. So it delivers, AIM in this case, or MMM, delivers an optimal budget allocation plan. And that's by media source, by app, by campaign type, and by region. So let me just clarify what that means. MMM builds models, and if you're doing it correctly, you would build a model for your app on iOS and Android, and you would do that by region as well, at least your tier one regions. And it would give you the information back by media source, by app, so that would be iOS in this example, by campaign type. So it could give you it broken down by campaign type, which would be it's a growth campaign or a branding campaign, and then by region. So that'd be USA, for example. So that information is generated automatically. Stage two would be the media buying team. So the media buying team would execute that information. So the information would be adjust your spend here, adjust your spend there. And the media buying team would then proceed to make their campaign level optimizations. They would do this by media source, by the performance data, and by creative metrics. And then stage three is automatic reconciliation. So the new campaign data is aggregated, the machine learning models are updated every 24 hours, and budget allocations and forecasts are improved. So it's learning from the market, from your data. So it's a continuous learning system, and it's always up to date with the latest information.
Yeah, I know we're at time, Gary. This flew by again, and there's great questions that we've gotten in the chat, so I've responded to some of those. But if the next part of this series will be how to choose the right MMM solution. There are obviously a variety of options on the market, some that are kind of do-it-yourself in-house, others that are a kind of a SaaS platform like AIM. So we will unpack that in more detail and try to get to some of these questions that came in that discussion as well. If you do want to get in touch with our team to discuss in more detail AIM, MMM in general, before August 30th, where we'll have part 3, you can go to aimplatform.io and book a meeting, and we would love to connect with you for some of those meatier questions and topics. So please stay on after the webinar. We have a survey. We'd love to get your feedback. And Gary, thanks for joining us for part 2, and we'll see you for part 3.
Great, thank you. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.